Bienvenue. Welcome to what is today called Conveyancing Quorum. Well, as the music starts, I have to say we have the happy band back together, but today not to celebrate all things property. No, it's because it's National Conveyancing Week. Who knew such a thing existed? Well, it does, and it's in support of conveyancing throughout the realm. As usual, we have our stalwarts of the trade, Hamish McClay of Surge Convey, Chris Gilsenen of Root Home, Juliet Baboolal of Gunnercooke, and Michelle Carr, the knight that goes out fighting for all things property related. But we shall talk more about that further on down the line. But because this is National Conveyancing Week, I think it's only fair that we throw Hamish McClay mercilessly under the bus.
Well, what brought this about was sort of twofold. I mean, it's a strange thing that we should actually be celebrating National Conveyancing Week by somebody who doesn't actually do themselves sort of do any conveyancing work. However, having said that, I think it's the Conveyancing Foundation, whatever. But strangely, of course, this week and next week particularly, I mean, it's been the whole of March, conveyancers out there have been busy as all get out trying to beat this stamp duty sort of idea. And of course, they'll get the blame if somebody doesn't cross that line in time to avoid the stamp duty increase. And there have been a couple of cases this week that I've actually sort of seen published saying that sort of, solicitors need to pull their socks up and all sorts of rubbish and stuff. But I mean, to me, because so much of my work is working with conveyancers, I can actually see the value, the tremendous amount of work which they do on behalf of their clients to avoid the risk that they may meet when they come across, what a lovely property. It might be a lovely property, but there might be a hell load of risk to actually attach to it. There's a lot of work to be done. And those that, in fact, they're so dedicated, they're almost like teachers used to be. When I used to be a teacher, dedicated people, they do it because they want to be doing it the right way and help their clients particularly effectively. And unfortunately, the general public aren't aware of the fact that, like anything else, you can actually choose what you want to buy. If you want top quality designer way, don't come to Bicester Village, because it's specially made for Bicester Village. You buy it from the designer direct, and it's much the same thing. You get your right client, you get your right solicitor, you get your right property lawyer, and what a difference it makes. And so today is to celebrate the quality property lawyers, to sort of help us on the way.
Wow. Well, that's quite a speech there. Juliet, let's all celebrate National Conveyancing Week, because in all seriousness, and we were talking about this off air, I think property lawyers get a lot of stick when they don't realize how much work and effort they do to try and make sure that things go through nice and smoothly.
100%. I mean, if you look at PI coverage for conveyancing is at an all-time high, and you have smaller firms folding because they're unable to meet the PI demands, and that just shows the level of risk that comes with conveyancing. People don't realize that, and you're right, Hamish. People are always looking to place blame, point the finger, and this is where communication comes in, because I don't think people are sort of saying, it's all the conveyancer's fault. But when a conveyancer goes quiet and doesn't communicate with the respective stakeholders in a transaction, blame does come to them, because, you've got people in the dark. It's all about managing expectations. And I think when you haven't got that skill set, and it's a soft skill set, it's not a legal thing. It's about picking up the phone and telling people, look, there's a delay because of X, Y, and Z. People are happy to be in the know. But when you're avoiding them and you're not answering their calls or not their emails, etc., you will be the finger will be pointed at you. The other thing I would say is conveyancers, apart from the property elements, I like to joke about the fact that probably after someone's therapist, we're number 2 in terms of those professional relationships, because we get to know our clients inside out. And there's so many private things. I mean, you're seeing people's ID, you're seeing their finances, you're seeing all of their, their life, really. So it's great that we are being acknowledged. I mean, I don't know if Conveyancing Week is just about conveyancers or it's about everyone who makes this big wheel turn, because we've always said it, there's so many stakeholders, so many moving parts, and so many people that do their part. So for example, something that I'm looking at that Chris may have introduced to me goes to Michelle to have a look at. So then, the purchasers can move on to the next part of it. And if Michelle doesn't do her part, then my part doesn't go anywhere, because the buyer might not want to move. And Chris is then, stuck. So everyone has a role to play. So I think everyone needs to be celebrated in this wheel of thing that we call conveyancing, that creates money for the economy. And it's just a great system that we've got here. With a few tweaks, I think that our property system and our property law would be ranked one of the best in the world.
Good Lord. Michelle, apparently we shouldn't be calling it National Conveyancing Week. We should be calling it National Everybody Who's Involved in Getting Shit Done Week.
Well, to be fair, I was a bit like, I don't really get involved in this to some extent, but Juliet's right, I do. But obviously in our part of it, and yeah, everyone has their part to play, but there is a big difference between skill set though. And just an example came up recently in my own home, where it's a new build. We've been here 6 years. There's been a bit of an issue with bits and pieces, and there's 52 properties, and all of a sudden it was just through the AGM with the road AGM, and they were saying about they needed this bit of information. I went, I've got that. And the reason I had that is because the person that I used to do my conveyancing was a damn sight better than everybody else's. So within 15 minutes, I was like, here's the file. Why didn't you ask me for it? And they sort of were all dumbfounded. And I was like, well, you're on that. You know that I'm the person that gets stuff done. Why not ask me? If you've been trying to find this information for 9 months, why didn't you ask me? There it was in not less than 9 minutes. But yeah, it does make a big difference, because when you get the information that you're supposed to be getting, and it's not just about when you're purchasing a property, it's once you've purchased that property and then you want to sell it again. If it hasn't all been done properly in the first place, you've got to go through the whole process again. And it does make a big difference. Communication is key. We see it all the time where we've got, not with Juliet, but with other sides of the fence, should we say, that aren't necessarily responsive. And people start getting really, really nervous and agitated, and they don't know what's going on when they just don't hear anything. And a lot of the time, but it's the same in any industry, I think, communication is always key.
Well, Chris, so I should have renamed this not Conveyancing Quorum, but Communication Forum, it seems.
Yeah, that's fair. There's I do really feel for some of the larger solicitor conveyancing factory type setups, because they're just overworked. They've got so much going on. Their price, it's a supply and demand thing. Their prices are low, so they get oversubscribed, but then they have to deal with all these cases. So yeah, I understand the complexity of it. But then service levels will slip. So yeah, it is a case of you quite often get what you pay for, unfortunately. And I know that there'll be lots of solicitors now under that. What are we? 10 working days, 10 days until the stamp duty deadline, and they'll be under huge amounts of pressure. But there'll be other solicitors, for example, the auction traders, who get deals done and through legals within 24 hours, but they absorb the risk. They'll still be getting deals done right now. So it is a case of, what are you prepared to do, and who are you prepared to work with and bring into your team to get these transactions through in the sorts of timeframes that you want. Most people buying often underestimate the amount of time that it takes, and all the moving parts and all the plates that you have to spin and all the extra things that you have to do to get just a single transaction line. And you're dealing with other people, and there's lots of other people in that process, and you're dealing with another side as well, which is completely out of your control, because you've got no control over the buyer or seller's side in terms of who they have on their team and who they have doing the conveyancing and the sorts of speeds that you can influence them at, because you can't. At best, you've got an estate agent who might be able to pull some levers and pick up the phone. But as Juliet's already mentioned, it's are you working with those people with those soft skills who are prepared to pick up the phone and are prepared to help move transactions further forward? So it's definitely challenging.
It was just, it occurred to me through a conversation I had with Hamish on a different channel, Ipsy Kind of Magic, that perhaps some of these factory conveyancing outfits are just taking on too much work, which means that there's an inversely proportionate relationship between the quality of the work and the amount of work you've got sitting on your desk.
At some point, yes, the quality slips to the point that it becomes commercially unviable, because you're just going to hemorrhage customers, and get so hammered in terms of your review ratings, and people will they'll just walk with their feet ultimately.
Right.
Yeah. So there is definitely a balance.
Hamish, we were only talking about this yesterday or the day before. The fact is, one of your, I think it was Heather, who said she felt impressed by a solicitor she's working with, who said, "I'm sorry, I can't take you on right now because I have all these searches that I'm going through with you in that case, I think, and I won't take you on anymore because I don't want the quality to slip."
I think that's the difference, because and actually we see this. The reason why Amazon is successful is because of the number of people who buy product through Amazon. And they basically, their business model is volume. And they're a bit like sort of Bill Gates did Microsoft at the time when computers were manufactured. Where all of these, the big sort of computer manufacturers, some of them gone by the wayside. Now, what Bill Gates said, well, I don't want to get involved with just building computers. I want to get involved with every computer. So what we do have is the corporate providers, they're competing with each other to actually sort of try and grab as much as they possibly can, because they can actually monetize it, they can make good profit out of it. However, it's not really necessarily in the best interest of the clients. Sometimes it can work. I don't know, maybe we brought this subject up yesterday or the day before. I mean, I had somebody speak to me. They'd had all this work done by somebody else, including the solicitor. They've asked me, can I tell them what it means? Now, that solicitor should be telling them what it means. They shouldn't have dumped upon them. And it's more or less, this is how it happened. It was dumped upon them. There's your searches. That's okay. Off you go. But they, looking at these, the poor first-time buyers are frightened to their wits' end because they've got all these red lights. They don't know what the heck it all means. Communication. The right professionals are the greatest collaborators in this world. We call them soft skills. They're not soft skills. They're really such a vital part of what is as vital as the legal knowledge that the person is providing. That particular skill of wanting to look after their client.
Well, Juliet, let me ask you. It does seem to me that these so-called soft skills are actually pretty hard because so many people don't engage in them.
Absolutely. You know, I had been doing some judicial training a while back, and the judge I was sitting with said to me, if someone comes into the courtroom and they are just, it's very clear they might be illiterate, then they haven't got a certain level of education, how do you explain something to them, and how do you satisfy yourself that they've understood what you've explained? And so, yes, communication is key, but you need to know your audience, because you're not communicating for yourself. You're communicating in such a way that they will understand. So a conversation that I have with another lawyer is not going to be a conversation, or not going to be on the same terms, although I'm conveying the same point. It's going to be very different with a first-time buyer who doesn't understand the terminology. And often what you find is that people think, oh, these lawyers, they sit on their thrones. I can't ask them any questions. I'm sorry, but if you've left a situation confused, your lawyer isn't doing a good job. You need to understand a purchasing transaction in such a way that you can explain it to the next person that comes along when your friend's buying a property and they hit a hard place, and you can then explain to them, certain concepts, etc. But if it's the blind leading the blind, or the solicitor's just treating it with a broad brush approach, and often you'll get that in those conveyor belt type scenarios because you're not even dealing with a solicitor. They often have a few people in the ranks that you deal with before the solicitor even looks at anything. And you also haven't got the same point of contact. So that's another thing. When you want to speak to someone,
That's
question.
drives me nuts. Constantly
You want the
changing.
same person. Yes, you do. And so there's a whole host of things there where, you know, you've got to get it right. And that's where these sort of conveyor belt type scenarios fall in terms of explanations, because for them to spend 10 minutes on the phone is time and it's money. So they haven't got the time to do that.
So, Michelle, people are constantly needing things explained, but people are also too scared to ask the solicitor in the first place. They end up coming to you.
Yeah, well, sometimes they do in some of these transactions. They'll come to me and then ask me questions that I cannot answer, which is definitely Juliet's territory. So we politely send them back into Juliet's domain. But in outside of conveyancing, yeah, I get people all the time that are signing contracts, not signing contracts. They sign contracts they don't even understand. They don't know how to implement them. And ultimately, I mean, a JCT contract, for example, it took me about 10 years to get my head around a JCT, because it's in, as Juliet says, it's in lawyer speak. And even, I don't know why the JCT contracts are as complicated as they are. And a lot of legal speakers is, rather than do this at this point and that point, it's 5 days before this date and that date and something, and it's so confusing, it's just unnecessary. But yeah, you do need to, if there's something complicated you don't understand, the best thing to do is employ someone or ask somebody that does understand it to explain it to you. And I totally agree with everything Juliet says, not just about conveyancing, just across the board with anything contractual.
So here we are celebrating all things conveyancing. I have to say, just before we go, it seems to work best when all sides pull together. Zara Olibokas has just jumped in. Legal work is knowledge work, not a tin of beans to produce on a factory line. I quite like beans. Anyway, but it, you know, not everyone can produce that special sauce. Let's not go there. Hamish, would you please take us home?
Well, there's not much to add to what Zara just actually sort of set in for us. What it is, I mean, we speak about conveyancers mainly because they do contribute so significantly, and it's they, if you like, that enable everything to happen. But what we've also found, we need to be celebrating everybody's week at some particular stage or another, and perhaps we'll do that. Perhaps we'll raise our cups of coffee to everybody else who's involved with the process, but particularly this week to the best conveyancers out there, and in particular Juliet.
Yes. So, well, look. Well, you've heard it from the boss. First of all, every aspect of this is a series of moving parts. It actually amazes me that property deals actually go through at all. There seems to be so many different moving parts that if you're not very well versed in communication, you can lose that thread. But nevertheless, get the right team around you, as Chris will probably tell you, that you get the right team around you and you can get all sorts of deals done. I would say to all of you out there, remember, having the right team around you is critical, especially when you're possibly committing to the largest single expenditure and probably most of our lifetimes. But nevertheless, I wish all of you the very best of luck, and make sure you get the right team around you. Until next time, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars and the moon, and do look after that mental health. Goodbye.